Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into issues at the college level. My guest today is Shawn Abbott. He's the Vice Provost at Temple University, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, so you've been on the show before at another university. So just give us a little background on where you went to college and how you got from graduating college to where you are today.
Sure. So as you know, I'm relatively brand new to Temple University, which is in Philadelphia, not too far from where we are right now. It took me just about an hour to be here. And I arrived at Temple in May of 2018. Before that, I was the Dean of Admissions and the Assistant Vice President at New York University, which is the largest private university in America. Before that, I was the Director of Admissions at Stanford University, which is a place that I think most people on your show would know, in Palo Alto, California, just south of San Francisco. And actually coming to New York was sort of a homecoming for me because I spent 10 years of my life before Stanford at Columbia University, the other university of New York City. And I actually started my career in college admissions at Boston University, which is not all that unlike the places that I've most recently represented, NYU and Temple, in the sense that it's a quintessentially urban university. Right. But my very actually first position working full-time for a university was right down the road at Drexel University, which is not too far from Temple. I got my start in higher education really in the area of fundraising and alumni relations. So I worked in the Office of Institutional Advancement, which was the office that is pretty much responsible for cultivating donors and building relationships with alumni and corporations and foundations. So actually coming back to Philadelphia is sort of a homecoming as well.
Great. So as Vice Provost of Temple University, give us a description of what is a Vice Provost.
Yeah, no one knows what a Vice Provost is. Most people don't know what a Provost is. The Provost at any college university, and I would say most college universities have this title or this person at the college university. And in essence, a Provost is the Chief Academic Officer. So you typically have the individual academic department heads, or in the case of Temple, you have different schools and colleges, and the deans of the individual schools and colleges report up through the provost. And the provost typically reports directly to the president, at least at any university that I've represented. The provost really is, in many ways, the deputy to the president of the college university, at least the academic arm of the university. And in most cases, the provost also has a few direct reports where the administrative functions that support the individual schools and colleges and the academic enterprise of the university report to the provost as well. So I'm the vice provost, and my portfolio involves basically anything related to enrollment management. So I oversee the undergraduate admissions office, the Office of Student Financial Services, which is a fancy name for the Office of Financial Aid. I oversee our Military and Veterans Services Center. So any of the kind of student services that directly support the academic enterprise of the university.
So what's the daily function? Do all of the deans from all the different colleges and things, do they just talk to you every day?
It's a lot of consulting and bridge building with the individual deans of the schools and colleges. So I interface with either the deans or their direct reports and their administrative staff in helping to both attract students. A lot of what I do and a lot of my roles and responsibilities are in the space of marketing and communications. So I work really closely with our Division of Strategic Marketing Communications at Temple, and really helping to craft the Temple message and to really, in many ways, be the kind of chief spokesperson for the university when communicating with parents, prospective students, current students, families, counselors, alumni volunteers that support the institution. So I spend a lot of my time working with the deans of the different schools and colleges, and then also working with the directors of the different offices that report to me. So we have a director of admissions, we have a director of student financial services, a university registrar, and I'm constantly meeting with them and developing the kind of strategic plans that exist within their individual offices.
So do all universities do some type of marketing?
I would say in 2018, yeah, it's actually probably a pretty significant part of any university's administrative operation.
Right.
In many ways, college universities in America function like corporations and businesses, and without a strong marketing communications operation, you're likely not going to be able to enroll the kind of class that you want to enroll.
So do you utilize all the platforms that are out there, from Facebook, Twitter?
Of course, yeah. I mean, within marketing communication at any college university, you have different staff members that are directly responsible for communicating the message of the institution in all platforms: social media, digital media, film. You have individuals that are responsible for managing the university's website, print collateral, advertising, media space. Then you also have individuals that are exclusively dedicated to managing your public relations of the university and your community relations within wherever you are located, interfacing with both local and state and federal constituents.
So, and this advertising that you do, does it go across the country, or does a university like Temple really just focus on the geographic area?
Yeah, I mean, Temple has a pretty sophisticated marketing and communications operation. And again, I don't oversee that operation. I'm really responsible for interfacing with my colleagues in our Division of Strategic Marketing and Communications. So I probably wouldn't be the best to give you the kind of specific details about how sophisticated that operation is. But as Temple has grown and evolved to become more than simply a regional institution, and now has more of a national and if not an international audience, the kind of advertising and the marketing that we do really reflects not only an interest in drawing students from the kind of greater Philadelphia area, the tri-state, New Jersey, Delaware Valley kind of area, but also reaching really a national audience and an international audience.
And that brings me to my next question, which is international abroad type schools.
Yeah.
Does Temple have it? I know Maris, that sponsors a show,
Absolutely.
has one in Italy. How does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, I think increasingly you're finding that American universities, in order to really proclaim with any kind of credibility that they are world class or that they are internationally recognized, it requires, it necessitates actually having a physical presence abroad. So, you look at whether they're the least selective or the most selective universities in America, you're finding that more and more American college universities are really developing a physical presence abroad. So you have Yale University that is in partnership with the National University of Singapore. You have Duke University, which just enrolled its first freshman class at Duke Kunshan University in China, in mainland China. You have, where I came from, NYU, which opened the first first liberal arts college in the Middle East in the form of NYU Abu Dhabi, and the first degree-granting American university to have a campus in China with NYU Shanghai. Wow. You have universities like Northwestern and Carnegie Mellon and Georgetown University, which are part of the Education City environment in Doha, Qatar. You have, even just last week, Northeastern University in Boston announced that they were going to, I'm not sure if absorb was the right word that I would use, but for lack of a better word, they are going to absorb a small humanities college in London. So they will have a physical presence in the United Kingdom. Temple University's definitely been a leader in this space for a long time. We have Temple Rome, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary, which is a magnificent place. I luckily was given the opportunity to visit Temple Rome in my first few months on campus, and it's just a couple of blocks from the Vatican, a couple blocks from the Pantheon and the Colosseum. Wow. It was awesome. And then Temple Japan is actually the oldest American university to have a degree-granting presence in Japan, in Tokyo. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely a space that I'm very comfortable in. At all of the universities that I've represented, whether it's Columbia or BU or Stanford or NYU and now Temple, international education has always been a big part of what I've been responsible for and what I've worked with. So it's nice to be at a place that values that, but I think you're going to see increasingly that American college universities are going to continue to really have a presence
Now,
abroad.
how do universities actually pick a place? You know, why does Temple have Rome? Why do they have Japan? How do they end up picking
I
those
think
places?
a lot of the relationships that American college universities have with a lot of the campuses that have been created abroad really have evolved out of partnerships with typically the government in any particular country.
Gotcha.
So in both the UAE and in China, for example, with New York University, both of those relationships were really cultivated through strong relationships between senior university administrators, typically the president, and governmental entities, you know, whether it's a royal family or the Ministry of Education or some type of, I find, at least based on the partnerships that I'm most familiar with, people, the kind of situations or the kind of scenarios that you have in Doha and in Abu Dhabi and in Singapore, typically they're partnerships between what is already in existence in any particular country and what a university is hoping to achieve. Alternatively, sometimes I think a college university really sees an opportunity to have a presence abroad in a city that is incredibly influential. Like, it would not surprise me that Northeastern, and I'm not at Northeastern, so I really don't have any business saying this, but it wouldn't surprise me that Northeastern University probably had an interest in having a presence in London, because London is such an influential city for students to have networking opportunities, to have future educational opportunities for graduate school, perhaps where they have a strong alumni base, maybe the proximity to Boston, being on the East Coast, and getting closer to the UK from Boston. So sometimes I think it's convenience, sometimes I think it's the influence of the city that city might have on the economy. But I think primarily it's existing relationships or emerging relationships between governmental entities and university leaders.
So how many students actually go abroad? Is there a good majority of students that are doing this from Temple and any other universities?
You know, that is I really should know, after being at Temple for 6 months, how many students we have abroad. Most of the students that we have that go abroad do really funnel toward Temple Rome and Temple Japan, but we have a number of other programs where we don't actually have a physical presence abroad, but our students will take advantage of exchange programs that we have with other foreign universities. And I don't, right off the top of my head, know the number of students that we have that will go abroad. At NYU, I knew that we at one point had the largest number of students that would travel outside the United States to any college university outside the United States. And I should know that about my own university now, but I don't.
So another issue that comes up with colleges is the optional testing for universities. It's
probably the most growing phenomenon in American higher education right now. This idea that you can be a competitive applicant to a wider variety of different college universities in America without standardized testing is something that is unprecedented. When I was a high school senior in 1988, you pretty much took the SAT. I didn't even know about the ACT back in 1988, because in the late 1980s, I would say the kind of test that you took had a lot to do with the geography. It had a lot to do with the region that you lived in. So back when I was a high school senior, the ACT was more prominent on the West Coast or maybe in the Midwest. And I think, but in my kind of world, you pretty much took the SAT and that was it. And that really dictated your kind of range of college universities that you can be competitive for. But now in 2018, you have just over 1,000 college universities that no longer require standardized testing to gain entry. And that just happened this past summer.
So now, what is the definition of optional testing?
So the definition can vary widely from institution to institution. I would say universities that claim to be test optional, of which Temple is one of them. In fact, we're probably one of the very first public urban research universities to become test optional. Most of the college universities that became test optional back in the 1980s and 1990s were really small liberal arts colleges. But the growing part of this landscape has been more in the space of research universities. And I would say most universities that claim to be test optional really mean that it's entirely optional whether or not you want to submit your standardized testing to be considered for review. So at Temple, if you decide you want to send your SAT scores, we will review them. And once you submit them, we can't unsee them. So if you submit them, they are going to become part of our evaluation process. If you don't want to send them, if you're not proud of your scores, if you feel like there are other elements of your application that are more reflective of who you are as a candidate, then you can hold them and not show them to us.
And so what do they base on the
Everything
admissions
else. I
then?
would say, whether you submit testing or you don't submit testing, I don't know of a college university in America, and I really mean America because I don't have any business speaking about any other country, but at least in the United States, I don't know of any college university in America where your academic record is not going to be unequivocally the most important part of the evaluation process. So even if you have powerful standardized testing, your grades, the kind of curriculum that you take advantage of during your high school experience, your grade point average, if your high school provides a class rank, all that kind of stuff is absolutely going to really vault to the top of any admission evaluation process, whether a university is test optional or not.
So the AP type classes in high school, those are much
all
better?
That kind of stuff is going to carry much more weight in the admission process in the absence of standardized testing. So if you're going to forego submitting your standardized testing, you have to go through the process with the acknowledgement that the university is likely going to put more weight on everything else in the admission application. Now, it's not just your academic experience, but you're also going to likely be asked to submit a resume or an extracurricular chart, what you do outside the classroom, maybe a letter of recommendation or 2 or 3, essays, writing samples, interviews. There are going to be all sorts of other things that might come into play as well. But in the absence of standardized testing, the focus really comes on the academics.
So that brings up another question then. A lot of students in high school don't know how many other extracurricular activities should I take.
Yeah.
Do I just do sports, or do I do like photography club or the key club or something like that? Is there something at the college that says, oh, you should take 3 extracurricular or 5 or 10 or 50?
So I've never represented a place that would give direction on how many things that you should be involved in outside the classroom. Personally, I think it's hard to imagine or hard to believe that any mortal human being can be a really strong student and do more than 2 or 3 things outside the classroom in any meaningful way. So when I see that a student when they're 17 and they have a resume that's 2 and 3 or 4 pages long and they've got 15 to 20 different activities, I really question how meaningful any of those activities can be. It's just not realistic, and nor do I think it's actually healthy for a student to be involved in that many activities outside the classroom. So there isn't any recipe, there isn't any kind of magic number. There are some students that are going to be incredibly angular and do one thing really well.
Right.
So, I remember at Stanford, we would have students who perhaps their sport was the one thing that they do really well. But if you want to go to Stanford, you want to play on a Division I athletic team that functions very much like a training ground for the Olympics, you likely can't do more than that one thing really well. So we would see a lot of students that would be successful in the admission process at Stanford that were incredibly angular. By the same token, I can probably count the same number of students that I've found that have been just as successful in the admission process that have been a little bit more versatile, that have had maybe 2 or 3 things under their belt that they have done really well. Maybe not to an Olympic caliber, but they've been a little bit more diverse and a little bit more versatile.
And how about charity work, things of that sort? Is that good to have?
I'm only compelled by charity work. I'm only compelled by volunteerism if you're truly volunteering for altruistic reasons.
Gotcha.
I've always been kind of turned off by the students that count the number of hours that they help other people, or they count the number of dollars that they raise. I mean, to me, that doesn't really speak of altruism when you're counting how much you're helping somebody. So I would say service and volunteerism, it might be a requirement in your high school, but if it's not a requirement for your high school, I'd only encourage you to get involved in that space if that's really what's important to you and you really want to help people.
And how about essays? Is it very important that the school, because when they fill out an application at a school, there's an essay there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there is. And for the universities that subscribe to the Common Application, which is the most common way that students apply to college universities in 2018, there is a personal statement that everyone has to submit to be eligible for admission. I will tell you that I also tend to be of the opinion that that's probably the most manipulated part of the college university admission process. And the longer and longer that I do this work, and even though I'm not in the admissions office anymore at Temple, I'm not the admission director, so I'm not responsible for evaluating candidates for admission.
Yeah.
I would say at the end of my kind of career in college admissions, became very skeptical about the authenticity of those personal statements. And I had probably less and less faith that the personal statements that we were reviewing were not personal statements that had not been edited and not been sanitized by 1 or 2 or 15 or 20 other individuals, some of whom may have been paid or may have been coached.
Gotcha.
It's still a part of the process. It's still something that you should focus on, and it's something
But the
that
grades is pretty much what you're saying.
definitely it's not going to carry more weight than your academic record.
Yeah. Now, how about military? How about if kids want to go to school and do an ROTC or something like that? What's
That's
needed
awesome.
then?
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 avenues for students who are either in the military or veterans. You have students that will finish high school and immediately arrive on a college university campus and take advantage of any of our ROTC units, whether it's Air Force or Army, Navy. There are typically agreements that any college university have with other college universities where you can do your basic training and be involved as an ROTC student and actually get significant financial assistance toward your education as an undergraduate. That's one conduit. That's one way into a college university. But most college universities, I would say, also are very friendly to students that are exiting the military or are active military and are looking to take a couple classes. So at Temple, I oversee the Military and Veteran Services Center, and we're definitely a place that is incredibly friendly to veterans, and we have this one-stop shop that's led by these 2 women that really will do anything to help students find their way to all the different resources that you might need if you're trying to learn about gaining entry into a college university as you're exiting the military.
And how about financial need? I mean, a lot of families out there, colleges are expensive these days.
Yeah.
What does Temple do to help with that?
Yeah. So most of the students that come to Temple are on some form of financial aid. We have, and when I say most, I mean the majority, the sweeping majority of students receive some type of financial aid. Temple is arguably among the more affordable college universities that students might be looking at, because something that a lot of people don't know, and quite honestly, I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't realize this until I started looking at the position that I have at Temple, but Temple is actually Philadelphia's public university. A lot of people think just the name Temple, they're assuming that they're assuming incorrectly that it's religiously affiliated, and other folks will incorrectly assume that it's a private university, but it's public. So already you're talking about a lower price point for students from Pennsylvania. Even out of state, though, if you look at our out of state total cost of attendance, if you look at your educational expenses and your housing and your meal expenses, you're still talking about a university that is typically going to be, at least on a price point without any kind of financial aid, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 less than some of the other elite urban universities, urban private universities in the Northeast and on the West Coast. So in terms of what we do for students for financial aid, in order to qualify for any kind of need-based financial assistance, students have to complete the free application for federal student aid. So that's that online form that becomes available by the federal government online every October 1st. And we use that form to gauge how much you need at Temple, and that's how we allocate the need-based financial aid. And then and this is the first time I've had this, or actually the first time since at Stanford, we have a merit scholarship program where, unlike Stanford, where all of the merit scholarships were reserved for talent in athletics. All of the, I shouldn't say all, but we have both athletic merit scholarships and academic merit scholarships, as well as artistic merit scholarships. So we have a pretty wide variety, a pretty impressive suite of merit scholarships where we are allowed to give financial assistance to students regardless of their need. So that can bring their price point down significantly as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our show. Usually I ask my guests, what advice do you want to give to parents and their kids out there that want to come to Temple University? What can you tell them about the university, and what advice you want to give them?
Sure. I mean, I think the thing that I love people to know about Temple that is sort of unexpected is that, and I hate to kind of use a Rocky Philadelphia metaphor, but it's definitely a university that punches above its weight in the sense that I don't think a lot of people realize just how intense the academic enterprise and the experience is at Temple. We just graduated our first Rhodes Scholar. He just started at Oxford University.
Wow.
He actually he transferred for a community college in Philadelphia to come to Temple and became a Rhodes Scholar. He's a graduating senior this year. We just were awarded our first Goldwater Scholar, which is kind of like the Nobel of the sciences. Yeah. We had our first Carnegie Fellow awarded on our faculty. We just reached the highest level of research classification by the Carnegie Foundation, reserved for the top 4% of American college universities based on the dedication that they have to research. We cracked the top 40 of Fulbright Award winners for the first time ever. So it's a pretty powerful academic enterprise, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. You know, we're kind of in the shadow of the University of Pennsylvania and Princeton and all of these other incredibly prestigious universities up and down the East Coast corridor, but it really is, it's a diamond in the rough in Philadelphia, and it's a really exciting place. And the city, too, is something that it's interesting to see. I helped during our move-in day experience where freshmen moved in onto campus, and it was really fun to see parents dropping their kids off at Temple, and parents that grew up in Greater Philadelphia, New Jersey, who had not been back to North Philadelphia in a long time. Wow. And to see the kind of renaissance that is happening in North Philadelphia, it's just awesome. You know, to me, Philadelphia is like a combination between New York City and Boston. It's the best of both worlds. And it's just a really exciting place.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah. So you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.